Would you say that it's a matter of, let me rephrase this properly. It's a matter of doing the most amount of, at your level, doing the most amount of training that you can recover from at this point. That's like what's required to reach the upper end of in terms of gains at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's
And it's
about.
100%. Like
Okay.
I'm
Okay, yeah.
cruising that.
Someone wins worlds, they win the overall, and you speak to them, and they're like, "Yo, dude, I trained like one set to failure." What would you like? Would you be like, "Yo, dang, maybe I got to change some things"? Would that be interesting information for you at that point? Would you take that information maybe and do something with that?
Hmm. Some people, not everyone, they don't understand how strength works for bodybuilding. So basically, when you add muscle, to me, like volume is still the answer. I know everyone's like, no, it's not volume, it's mechanical tension. Like, I understand what they're saying, but if you're making your muscles do more work, they need to adapt. I've been training, gosh, 22 years, not with the specific reason to be the best in the world at this. That's been about 12 years now. But yeah, I mean, I've done lower volume in the past. I've grown, but guess what? The volume you grew from 10 years ago, I don't think it's going to work too well for you now.
So let's talk about the training split. People are going to be curious about this. What's that looking like now? The training frequencies, you mentioned you train body parts 3 times per week, but how often are you in the gym? Basically, the volume per maybe exercise as well. Maybe we can dive into those details.
So, the majority of my training since Worlds in 2022 has been a 6 day per week split. So, it's basically upper, lower, repeat. That's what it is.
Oh,
So, it's 3 times a week, or I should say, 3 times I'm hitting everything. Recently, though, just with my knee issue that we discussed, I lowered my frequency from leg training just to two, which is fine. I'll be able to retain and regain any lost tissue I might have lost, which I probably didn't, which is fine. So as of right now, I'm training 5 times a week. So it's upper, lower, upper, off, lower, upper, off. Done. Repeat. So it's 3 times a week, upper body, twice a week legs at the moment. I touched on this a little bit before. Quads was really number one in terms of trying to bring up that weak point. Back is right behind it with shoulders and triceps as well. So it's been pretty evident that this split has worked because I accrued quite a bit of muscle mass in all those areas. I really grew everywhere, but I think the most was those muscles because we just heavily pounded it with volume. But I did write down some of my volume landmarks, if you will, from this current split. I'm not doing a ton of volume at the moment. I was doing a lot more, like I told you in the past, but for right now, I'm doing 24 sets of chest. This is per week, 21 sets of back, 24 sets of deltoids, 9 sets of biceps, 18 sets of triceps, 12 of quads, 12 of hamstrings, 6 of glutes, 6 of calves, 6 of core, and then 8 sets of neck. So that's
okay.
pretty much what I'm hitting at the moment. Again, coming off of that little bit of a knee issue, that's why my volume changed. But I have like 12 weeks before prep to like kind of get my volume tolerance back. And yeah, I'll be ready to go.
Here's an interesting question for you that I just thought of now. Would you say that it's a matter of, let me rephrase this properly. It's a matter of doing the most amount of, at your level, doing the most amount of training that you can recover from at this point. That's like what's required to reach the upper end of in terms of gains at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's
And it's
about.
100%. Like I'm
Okay.
I'm cruising that line between injury and staying healthy pretty much most of the time, aside from a deload and maybe like an introductory microcycle where my volume's a little less. But like in the bulk of my training where my volume's very high, I mean, yeah, I'm riding that line because I have to. I know what's going to make me grow, and I know more volume is the answer. So thankfully, I haven't really had any horrendous injuries since bodybuilding. Going to try to keep it that way, but yeah, little aches and pains here and there. But yeah, I'm always riding that line because it's the human body. We could only take so much, and when you're executing a sport at the highest level, you're going to push your limits. So yeah, that's just part of sport, and I 100% push the limits. There's no question about it.
Yeah, that's why it's important for those of you tuning in to understand if that's you, if you fit that category or not. Because again, if not, then hey, you want to just build a respectable physique, whatever that means. Again, that's subjective, right? And fit it into your lifestyle nice and neat. And maybe it's not this like, hey, I'm gonna go into the gym 6 days a week and push it to the absolute limit every time. When I say limit, I'm talking what you're doing, right? Oh, there might be someone out there trained twice a week and trains to failure or whatnot. But again, I've yet to see. I would love to, like, I haven't seen it where someone's doing one set to failure, let's just say, like who's won worlds. Like I haven't seen it. I know it's like, okay, maybe
No, I
then,
wouldn't
but
think
this is
so.
this is what the conversation starts to go to. It's like, oh, but that's
Hmm.
just genetics. These guys are genetic freaks. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know if we can do that. I That's not fair because you guys are on to a certain extent. But if we took
Hmm.
Gary Amlinger, I'm saying your last name right? It's Amlinger or Amlinger, by the way.
So my whole family's divided, so you could choose.
Okay, cool. If we take Gary
I do. So
Amlinger,
by the way,
yeah.
Amlinger is how I say it, so you can rock
Okay,
that. That's
cool.
fine.
Sweet. All right, wicked. If we take Gary Amlinger and we put him on like one set to failure, it's like, are you building more muscle at that point, or at the very, least, are you just going to be maintaining muscle? I mean, A, we don't know until you maybe do it, but at the same time, we haven't seen it. So we can't really say like someone at your level. If you're listening to this and that's you, reach out because I haven't spoken to
Hmm.
anyone on the podcast that's doing that at your level.
Hmm.
I have to really think about that though. Maybe there's one or two guys, but I have to really think about that. So, but definitely reach out to me because I'd be curious. I don't know if
Yeah,
you want
me
to add.
too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love to know.
But again, does that what would you do with that information? Would you change anything, Gary?
What, like if I tried it and I was growing from that amount
No,
of
like
volume?
let's say say there was someone out there that wins worlds. Let's just say, let's
Hmm.
make up a fun hypothetical for a second here. Someone wins worlds, they win the overall, and you speak to them, and they're like, "Yo, dude, I train like one set to failure. What do you do?" And then you're like, "Yo, I train 6 days per week, 3.5 hours a day." What would you like? Would you be like, "Yo, dang, maybe I got to change some things"? Would that be interesting information for you at that point? Would you take that information maybe and do something with that?
Hmm. Well, I would want to know if that person was doing that. I'm assuming it's taken him years to be the best natural bodybuilder on the planet. So he didn't just start, right? He must have been doing this for years. Were you doing that the whole time? Or did you just start doing it? Now, if you were doing it the whole time, pretty much when you first started, for sure that's an interesting thing to have, to look at because that's rare. Will I change everything? No, but I would like to talk to that person, see how he trains, see what his form and repetition tempo is like, what's his recovery like. Honestly, how tall is he? What does his muscle bellies look like? His joints? Is he just like a genetic freak where he just looks big anyway, even with little muscle? Because a lot of people are, not a lot, but some people are like that.
I love that, bro. I love where your head's going with. That's interesting. There's a specific personality where this conversation tends to flow into the direction that it has because you're a guy who's doing that amount of volume. And then I've had so many conversations on here, obviously, for the past 4 years. And there's such a mix of guys doing this high intensity versus high volume, but not to the point where it's like so minimal, so minimalistic. And if it is, again, it's usually guys who are retired at this point. They have other priorities in life. So like when I talk
Hmm.
about, okay, yeah, you can maintain muscle. It's like you mentioned, like it requires a lot less to maintain than it does to grow. But when you talk about on this world stage, like competing at this level, I have yet to see somebody doing such a minimalist amount of work, with the exceptions of maybe, relatively speaking, like a Ben Howard who's training 3 days per week, but he's still doing volume. Like he's still doing like three set working sets per exercise, hard working sets. It's not like one set to failure. You know what I mean? Like I haven't seen
Right.
that. Have you tried that, by the way? That's an interesting question. Have you actually tried that approach?
Like 2 or 3 times a week training,
And one set, that's it, just one set only.
one set per muscle.
Per one set per exercise. Doesn't necessarily have to be per muscle.
It can't be that many sets because if you're only doing it 2 times a week, I mean, how much could you fit in one day?
That's the other
Like you have
thing,
to do
right?
your whole upper body once a week. Yeah, I'm curious, like, okay, it's one set per exercise, but how many per muscle? I'd be curious to hear. But no, no, I mean, I've never tried it. Trying to think. I mean, honestly, the only time I train that, low amount is after competition when I'm recovering from a competition prep.
Right.
Maybe like a week, maybe like 1 to 3 weeks of like 3, 4 times a week. I'm not even doing two. Even like
Yeah.
after a hard competition prep where it's recovery so important, I still don't drop down to two. It's like three and up. But three doesn't last long. It's gonna elevate to 4, 5, 6 pretty quick. So no, I haven't really gave it a go. I've done lower volume than I'm doing now, of course.
Yeah.
I had to build up. I've been training, gosh, 22 years. Not with the specific reason to be the best in the world at this. That's been about 12 years now. But yeah, I mean, I've done lower volume in the past. I've grown, but guess what? The volume you grew from 10 years ago, I don't think it's going to work too well for you now. You have to increase set volume at a certain point. Like you can't just do the same sets over and over again. And if you're low volume, like where does that end? Like when do you add a set? So I'd be curious to hear from coaches who program very low volume, like how they do it. I would be
Yeah.
interested to hear.
Okay, so there you go. If you're listening to this, reach out. Maybe we can get a roundtable going. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, Gary, is that, the thought I have is like, well, what if it's similar to load, right? Like, let's say you're using the exact same load you did 10 years ago on like a specific exercise. Probably, unless you're increasing load somewhere else, like on another exercise for that body part, chances are you didn't build any muscle. But what would you have to say to that statement?
If you didn't get stronger for how long?
10 years, like you're doing like you mentioned the volume thing, right?
Oh.
So what worked 10 years ago for you on like in terms of the amount of load you did for X exercise, like a certain exercise, and then now you're 10 years later and you're still doing that same amount of load. I mean, chances are you probably didn't gain any muscle, I would think, unless where's the progression, as what I'd be curious about at that point, right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like some people, not everyone, they don't understand how strength works for bodybuilding. So basically, when you add muscle, that's usually why you get stronger. It's not like you get stronger and that makes you bigger. Yeah, you can get stronger on your lifts from a lot of different reasons, like central nervous system and things like that. But a bigger muscle usually can move big weight. That's like a good rule of thumb. So if you're doing the same weight, even 2 years in a row, that's a bad sign, especially if you're new. Like I have some people like coming on recently who are like 20 years old, like they're relatively new. Their training age isn't really that high, maybe a few years. But once you put them on proper programming, like their deadlift jumps like 100 pounds in a year. You should be able to substantially get stronger if your programming is on point. So 10 years, bad news. Yeah.
This is an interesting thought now I had. So like let me give you a hypothetical. Like let's say I'm doing an exercise and I'm getting stronger in it. The trend is going up, let's just say, okay? Let's say month one I was doing 150 pounds on the Nautilus Nitro chest press, right? We'll just give an example. And then 6 months later I'm doing 190. Same form, same everything, but now the load has gone up. And I'm doing that for two sets across. Let's just say two sets, and I can do that for two sets over there, and the reps have gone up with that load. Would you say that if I was able to like make progress on 4 or 5 sets from month 6 to 12 versus month 1 to 6, that my potential for muscle growth would be more if I didn't. But here's the thing I start wondering. It's like, well, did you stall? And why did you have to increase if you didn't stall? And how would you know you stalled in terms of muscle growth? I guess that's more of like, oh, you're looking in the mirror and whatnot. I know I'm kind of scattered here, but it's just my brain kind of working on overdrive right now when I start to think about these things relative to our conversation, right?
Hmm. So you're saying like in a month, so let's say you go from 150 to 190 on a chest press, you increased 40 pounds on a chest press in 1 month. Now,
No,
what are
like
you comparing that
let's say
to?
6 months,
Oh,
because that's quite unless
oh,
I'm like
six
a
months.
rookie. Yeah, let's say I'm like a rookie, that probably won't happen, right? But let's say 6 months. It was
Okay.
a new exercise and I climbed it all the way up to 190. I don't think I've stalled because progress is still going. Would you say it's okay, keep that going for your two sets, then you're making progress on that? Or it's like, okay, if we want to actually maybe leave no stone left unturned, it's like where do we add volume? Like, will that
Hmm.
maybe increase gains further? Or like how do you work through this as a coach? Like what would you do at that point? I'd be curious
That's a
actually.
Yeah, that's a pretty in-depth question because there's so many variables that matter to the
Mm,
answer. So it depends. Like one, physique photos matter.
okay.
So let's say that clearly your chest grew in 6 months. Now, are you stalling in strength at that 6 month mark?
Let's say I haven't stalled at all.
Oh, you haven't stalled. So you're just getting stronger. Okay,
Yeah,
considerably then.
yeah.
I think adding one set per week per muscle every like 6 to 9 months is, I think, a good rule of thumb in general. And again, that'll vary a bit because like my volume isn't static. So deload volume is lower, intro week is a bit lower, and then in the middle is where the high volume comes. So from the intro week lower, and then it just starts to ramp up to an attack week, and then it'll drop on a deload. So like again, that one set is kind of like I'm not really giving you much when I say like one set every 6 months or 3 months. But
Yeah.
that's a good question. If you're getting stronger, that's a good sign. Just make sure you're getting stronger and you're not fooling yourself. So let's say on chest press, you were doing a third in your workout and you were fatigued and you were doing 190. Now you're doing it first in your
Oh,
workout.
right.
Now you
Yeah,
added
of
30
course.
pounds because you're less fatigued. Did
Yeah,
you gain
that's
muscle? I don't know if you gain muscle.
yeah,
So
that's
like I said, there's just so many variables to this. But if I think a good rule of thumb, add in a set per muscle per week. If you feel that you're not gaining muscle in that muscle group for long periods of time, 3 or 6 months, that's pretty good. And then feel it out. Are you recovering from that volume? Are you continuing to get stronger? Good signs. Okay, don't touch it. You're getting bigger
mm,
and stronger, leave it.
leave it.
See how you do. And then
And
rinse, repeat. Progress photos are very important. See, okay, am I getting bigger? At this body weight last year, do I look the same? Like there's just a lot of different things you'd have to compare to kind of see when and where you throw in that extra set volume.
that is so interesting to me because I'm like, when someone's tuning in, I think that's important information for you to know if you are maybe just getting into this, or maybe you are more experienced and now you're thinking, well, this conversation is interesting to me. I've always done the low volume stuff. What happens if I do flirt with that? I think what happens is a lot of people flirt with the more volume, they get hurt, and then they're against it. They're like, no, this screwed me up.
Mhm.
And that's why they shy away from that. And then they navigate to the low volume stuff, which I can understand, obviously, because nobody wants to be hurt and injured, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. If you don't know how to increase volume and you just throw in volume kind of just like freely, and yeah, you could definitely get hurt. Listen, you got to be careful. You got to pay attention to your body. You got to be smart with your programming. But that's an interesting point. Like, let's say someone really was training low volume, high intensity for a long time. What if they threw in some volume? What if? They
Right.
might grow a lot. I'm not sure. I would have to test it. But to me, like volume is still the answer. I know everyone's like, no, it's not volume. It's mechanical tension. Like I understand what they're saying, but if you're making your muscles do more work, they need to adapt. And it's a good rule of thumb as well. So
And this is
yeah.
where it's like smart programming is everything because if we're talking about, oh, it's high fatigue and this is way too fatiguing, but that's sports. Sports is fatiguing, bro. Like that's the way she
Mm,
goes. Like we're not talking about
yeah.
lifestyle training. We're talking about like being the best in the world, right? That's a very different thing. So if we're talking about doing that, well, yeah, it's going to be fatiguing and you're going to maybe want to see how much can you train in order to reach that full potential there. But you have to be okay with flirting on that line of, okay, this might, or yeah, you want to make sure you're doing things so on point, like maybe making sure you, again, this is where a coach can be handy or making sure that you understand your body. You can read the signs well to know when to pull back and add forward. But that's a lot of mental stress on people. And that's probably why there are a lot of people that just navigate to, okay, the safe side of things. I will just stick to the lower volume stuff. But hey, even low volume, ultra high intensity failure type stuff, that can get risky too in terms of injury too. So you gotta either on either side of the coin, it's like there's still a trade-off there, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you're going super heavy, especially on like big compound lifts, yeah, man, that there's an injury risk. If you're taking that set to 9.5 RPE, 10 RPE,
Yeah.
that's yeah, you can get hurt really doing low volume or high volume. That's a good point. Also, you mentioned like, for someone like me, yeah, I'm training, to be a world champion, so you can't don't copy me. I always tell people, like,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
don't copy my form. None of my clients have my form for the most part. None of them are doing my volume. I don't know anyone doing my volume. I would never say, okay, this works for me. That means it's going to work for everybody. That's the opposite of the truth. That's not correct. Everyone's an individual. You have to find their volume landmarks. What can they recover from? What can they grow from? It's a constant feeling out process, especially with new clients. But there are people for sure who just respond so well to training that they can go in, not have good form, barely train with intensity or volume and grow.
Yeah.
Now, does that
It's
mean you
crazy.
should try it? No, because that's a rarity, but they exist. That's athletics. Some people just have the freakiest genetics. They hit the lottery and they could kind of do whatever and grow. But most people don't have that privilege.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up with regards to those tuning in. It's like, yeah, don't just copy what Gary's doing because Gary built up to this over his whole career, this amount of training that he's doing. Like, you can't just go and run a marathon. You got to train for that amount. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna run a marathon today. Like, you got to like legit train to be able to have that work capacity to make sure you could do that in a relatively safe manner. You could maybe you could do it. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that it won't be as favorable versus if you train for it. Let's put it that way. Because there's these
Hmm.
guys who like are like they can will themselves to almost anything. Like there's those the mental elite, I like to call them. Like they're
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I'm gonna do a marathon today. Never trained for it, and somehow they just do it, right? I'm sure that exists out there, but that's maybe
Yeah.
that's not you, right?
No, no, no. I needed to train for every sport I
Yeah, yeah. So
did.
there you
Some people,
go.
you're right. They just like get in a sport and they're like sprinting like a near 10-second 100 meter just out of nowhere, like just because, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's the thing too. So for everyone watching, everyone's in a different place, different levels of the sport. Some people may have not even trained yet. They're just interested in bodybuilding and they might want to do that. But take things slow, learn it. It's a sport. There's a skill set involved. You have to be intelligent if you want to get anywhere. Yeah, so focus on that and take things day by day. I just made a post on Instagram. I said set the goal, then forget the goal. It's going to take a long time. So set whatever goals you have, but then, okay, I have that goal. All right, it's there. Now, today, what am I doing? And just focus day by day. There's no rush, there's no relax, there's no stress. This took me a long, long time, a lot of hardship, a lot of guessing, a lot of failing to get to this point. I just haven't really voiced it, in length, but yeah, it wasn't an easy road to get here. Injuries in the past, a lot of setbacks, from other sports that affected me in bodybuilding. So, take your time. If you're young, which I'm sure most of you are, there's no rush, man. Just take it day by day.